And speaking of cosplaying, our final story is we'll look at Raphael Warnock, who is continuing as a liberation theologian and not a real reverend, continuing to cosplay Christianity. Just recently, he was on Joy Reid and on her program on MSNBC after his win in Georgia, and he made some really interesting remarks about abortion. So here are those for you.
But I've been studying the scriptures my whole life. I'm committed to the faith. And as a pastor, I have a profound reverence for life. And as a pastor and a person of faith, I have a deep respect for choice. And so if you care about life, we ought to find a way. That's a place where government could show up and address the obvious bias in our healthcare system.
It's what Jesus would do.
I think it's exactly what Jesus would do.
Now, the first thing I want to say about that clip is not the abortion comments. We'll get to those in just a moment. But the first thing I want to say is that, like, any dork can beat a football player that has never been in political office before. And the comments that Raphael Warnock just made prove it. Like, you don't have to be smart. You don't actually have to even be a good preacher, know the Bible or anything like that to preach in some churches, much less win elected office. What you have to do is you have to be willing to go up against a candidate who probably has no business running in the first place and can't really put together a thoughtful case for why they should be elected. And that's exactly what happened with Herschel Walker. Now, of course, Herschel Walker is a great alternative to Raphael Warnock. I would vote for dirt before I'd vote for Raphael Warnock. Unfortunately, that's not true of the good people of Georgia, some of them anyway. But suffice to say, let's end the party. Raphael Warnock barely beat an ex-football player that knows nothing about politics or really nothing about running for office. He just had enough money to be able to run for office, and that's all you need anymore in some states. Now, back more importantly to the abortion comments. Now, obviously, this is utterly ridiculous that when he says faith, when he says Christianity, when he says the Bible, it leaves me questioning, what Bible is he talking about? And what Christianity, what Jesus is he talking about? Because none of those things make sense actually in terms of a biblical form of Christianity. Now, of course, that's not what Raphael Warnock is talking about because he is not a biblical Christian. He is a liberation theologian, and liberation theologians merely put a subjective lens upon all things Christian, and they try to read Christianity through a kind of woke social justice form of Christianity. So whenever they can find something like Jesus being oppressed, it's because he's victimized and marginalized, and we must overcome our oppressors. But they forget the fact that Jesus overcame his oppressors by being God and dying on the cross. And they forget that the oppressors are not really people at the end of the day, as much as it is a much more deeply spiritual need that people have, and they're oppressed by their own actions and their own decisions. But of course, a liberation theologian could never suggest personal responsibility and personal repentance as a cure for some of the difficulties that we face in this life. All of this is because liberation theologians and others like them are more interested in subjective versions of reality than they are in objective versions of reality. See, there is no Spider-Verse and no alternate universe where the kind of Christianity that Warnock just explained actually exists, because he's speaking entirely subjectively and placing a postmodern perspective on Christianity rather than a historical, legitimate, objective perspective on Christianity. And this brings me to kind of the whole point of the episode today, is that as long as we have people who are not equipped and not qualified to actually help us discern truth and reality through objective means, we will continue to take on a pop culture reference for everything. Kim Kardashian will be the standard rather than Plato, because Plato told us long ago that the people that we should value in society are not people who are popular, not actors and not athletes, but actually philosophers. See, Plato came up with the idea that there is a group of people called the Guardians, a group of people who love philosophy, and that these people are the ones who will change the world. Now, let me be clear. When I say love philosophy, I don't mean people who love necessarily books or who love pontificating or who love just the high thinking that's found in elitist circles in the academy. What I actually mean is the original definition of philosophy. people who love wisdom. Philosophy, love of wisdom. People who really care about thinking clearly and not deceiving other people. See, these are the people who need to be in charge of society. And Plato said this about the guardians. Neither cities nor states nor individuals will ever attain perfection until the small class of philosophers whom we termed useless but not corrupt are providentially compelled, whether they will or not, to take care of the state. And until a like necessity be laid on the state to obey them, or until kings, or if not kings, the sons of kings or princes, are divinely inspired with a true love of true philosophy. See, I think ultimately what Plato is alluding to here is the idea that if we're going to understand what truly matters in society, if we're going to truly understand what is true, what is reality, we must do it upon things that have been well thought through. So, in other words, I think the guardians would agree with this, those people who love philosophy. They would agree that what matters most, the priorities that we establish in life, should be based upon time-tested wisdom, not just merely pop culture, not just merely what the latest rapper says today, but actually things that have been carried on throughout generations and through generations have been tested to be true. And then the second thing, I think that legitimately, thoughtfully, we could add to that is, even though some of you may not be Christians or believe that there even is a God, we could add to that divine revelation. Because if a God exists that desires to communicate to his people and wants to reveal what is right and what is true to his people outside of what we feel and what we think, but he wants to speak to our hearts to help us understand what is true and right and good, then that is the voice that we should be listening to above all else. So in other words, guardians would do this. They would love philosophy in the form of time-tested wisdom and divine revelation, and they would base what is true and what is right around those tenets. In the meantime, society continues to look and long for comfort rather than truth, to feel good rather than truth. And C.S. Lewis said this. He said, if you look for truth, you may find comfort. But if you look for comfort, you will find neither, only soft soap and wishful thinking, and in the end, despair. And perhaps that's why the suicide rate is skyrocketing. People are finding it harder and harder to stay together in a functional marriage, and so many other things. Because we have not yet found where we can truly derive objective sources of truth. But I know a book, and I know a God, Jesus, Bible, who can help you with that. So you just got done watching a small excerpt of a much larger episode. You can find the link to that full episode down below in the description of this video. So you definitely need to check that out, because if you like that clip, you'll like the much larger episode. And while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click that little bell to be notified when great new episodes of Indie Thinker come your way. Thanks for watching.